Legendary Greeks, Gaia. Representing the earth itself, Gaia was born of chaos, the mother of all the natural features of earth. Gaia was a supreme being honored by the Olympian gods as well as common Greeks. Gaia and Uranus, the starlit sky, produced the Titans, who were the first race on earth. Gaia was imagined by early Greeks to be a bountiful mother and is represented as a gigantic woman to whom those Greeks offered gifts of fruit and grains. Marriage. On the rare occasions that wealthy Athenian women were allowed to leave their homes, they were guarded by the men in the family. It would be a disgrace if an Athenian woman or girl met and fell in love with a non-Athenian. Marriage to a non-Athenian would mean that their children would not be citizens. Only citizens in Athens could own land or participate in government. Getting married was not usually a matter of love in ancient Greece. It was a legal agreement. A young woman's father provided a dowry, money to pay for taking care of the bride, as part of the marriage agreement. Divorce in Athens was acceptable. As you might expect, the laws favored men. To make it official, a man simply had to declare his intent to divorce in front of witnesses. A man nearly always retained custody of his children, though he was often required to return the dowry. It was rare for a woman to divorce her husband. Women were not allowed to bring cases to court, so a woman had to appeal to the city archons. Even if she was granted the divorce, she was rarely allowed to keep her children. Words to know. Terracotta, a hard, semi-fired, waterproof ceramic clay used in pottery and building construction. Dowry, the property that a woman brings to her husband at the time of the marriage. Barbarian, foreigners with an unrecognizable language that sounded to the Greeks like barbar. Children. Children in ancient Greece were kept under close watch, and bad behavior was dealt with harshly. Some fathers would even send a slave to school with their sons to make certain that they didn't misbehave. Still, children were allowed to play, just like kids today. You might even recognize some of the toys they played with: balls, sphere, hoops, tops, dolls, yo-yos, and even miniature chariots. At age 7, young boys went to school. Young girls, on the other hand, were trained by their mothers at home in weaving and other household skills. Teachers in ancient Greece were called grammatists. Athenian toddlers. Just like toddlers today, Athenian toddlers had to learn proper hygiene. Archaeologists discovered an ancient potty chair made of clay when they excavated an Athenian marketplace during the 1950s. Slavery in ancient Greece. The ancient Greeks kept slaves or helots as early as 800 BCE, though no one knows the exact origins of this custom. Around 400 BCE, historians believe that slaves made up about one-third of the Athenian population. People became slaves for different reasons. Some were kidnapped and sold into slavery, some were prisoners of war, and others were born into slavery. Unlike slaves in early America, ancient Greek slaves were racially diverse. They came from many regions including Thrace, Syria, and Lydia, and their status could vary. Domestic slaves worked in the home, grinding grain, washing clothes, and cleaning. Black Sea, Thrace, Lydia, Greece, Mediterranean Sea, Syria. Houses at Olynthus. Olynthus was a town across the Aegean Sea from Athens in northeastern Greece. In the 4th century BCE, King Philip of Macedon, father to Alexander the Great, wished to expand his empire into Olynthus. When Olynthians tried to resist King Philip's expansion, Philip ordered that the city be demolished. Because nothing was ever rebuilt there, the remains are a perfect opportunity for archaeologists to study how people lived at Olynthus. Archaeologists have excavated about 100 houses, finding things like brass door knockers, clay sculptures, and a bronze arrowhead. The houses at Olynthus were made of sun-baked mud and laid out in a grid pattern with streets running between them. Some of the floors were decorated with mosaics, different colored pebbles arranged in a pattern and set into the mud floor. Floor mosaic. Like most ancient Greek homes, these houses were built around courtyards situated to take advantage of temperature variations between seasons. A sheltered balcony along 3 sides of the courtyard faced south, allowing sunlight to reach into the courtyard to warm the residents during the cold, sometimes snowy winters. In the hot summer months, people could stay cool in the shade below the balconies. Archaeologists believe that these private courtyards were used for drying laundry as well as other day-to-day chores. Athenian slaves were protected by law from physical abuse, but since slaves could not represent themselves in court, they seldom made official complaints. Starvation and flogging were 2 methods used to keep some slaves in line, but in many households, slaves were treated kindly. These slaves were considered a part of the family and underwent a special initiation ceremony upon becoming a member of a household. The purpose of the ceremony was to invoke the protection of Estia, goddess of the hearth. Some slaves lived separately from their masters and acted as bankers, shop managers, ship's captains, and artisans. They were paid for their work and were required to give a portion of their income to their owners. Slaves who earned a wage were sometimes offered the right to buy their freedom, thus becoming freedmen. Other slaves were owned by the city-state. Some worked alongside citizens on construction crews, building roads and public buildings. Others worked as jury clerks or coin testers. By far the most brutal situation for slaves was working in the silver mines in Laurium, a city in southeast Attica. Work in the mines continued 24 hours a day, with each slave doing a 10-hour shift. Most of the slaves were foreigners called barbarians who had been captured by pirates or soldiers. The slaves who worked the mines led a harsh life and faced exposure to lead, which was mixed with the silver. This caused many to die at an early age. Helots in Sparta outnumbered the Spartans 10 to 1, meaning there were 10 slaves for every Spartan. They were treated harshly in order to prevent an uprising. They had no political rights and could be executed without a trial. They were considered the property of the state and were forced to work the land in exchange for a small portion of the harvest. Spartans felt that by keeping slaves fearful, they could keep slaves obedient. Where does the word barbarian come from? Passion, the slave. Some Athenians refused to work at menial jobs, but these jobs still needed to be done. This provided opportunities for a limited number of slaves. One famous Athenian slave named Passion began his service working at a bank. During a time of financial crisis in Athens, he generously gave money to the state. Because of his actions, he was eventually granted citizenship. When he died in 370 BCE, he was the richest banker and manufacturer in Athens. Activity: baklava. Baklava is a rich pastry that may have originated in Asia Minor, then spread throughout the ancient Greek world during the Archaic period. Ingredients: 4 cups walnuts, 1 tablespoon ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon ground cloves, 3/4 cup sugar, 2 sticks butter, melted, 20 sheets phyllo dough, 1½ cups sugar, 1½ cups water, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, 1/2 cup honey. 1. Preheat oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Finely chop the nuts and toss with cinnamon, cloves, and sugar. Set aside. 2. Unroll the phyllo dough and cover it with a dampened cloth to keep it from drying out as you work. Brush the bottom and sides of a 9 by 13 inch pan with melted butter. Place 1 sheet phyllo in the pan and brush completely with butter. Place another sheet on top and brush with butter. Repeat until you have 7 sheets layered, each brushed with melted butter. Number 3. Sprinkle 1/3 of the nut mixture on top, then layer 3 sheets of phyllo, each brushed with melted butter. Then in the same way, layer 1/3 of the nut mixture, 3 sheets of phyllo, final third of nut mixture, and 7 sheets of phyllo. 4. Using a sharp knife, cut diamond or triangle shapes into your baklava all the way to the bottom of the pan. Bake for about 30 minutes. 5. While your baklava is baking, bring the sugar, water, vanilla, and honey to a boil, then simmer for about 20 minutes. 6. Remove baklava from the oven and immediately spoon your sugar syrup over it. Let cool, recut your baklava, and enjoy. The Persian Wars. In their quest to conquer the world, in 546 BCE, the Persians defeated King Croesus, ruler of Lydia, which is in present-day Turkey. Over several decades, the Greek city-states of the area gradually came under the control of the Persian king Darius I. The Persians appointed a man named Aristagoras to rule the Greek city of Miletus, which had been under Lydian rule. But Aristagoras didn't like Persia's strict rules, and in 499 BCE he organized a democratic rebellion called the Ionian Rebellion. He went to mainland Greece for support. The Spartans thought Aristagoras was a little sneaky and refused to help, but the people of Athens supported his democratic ideas and came to his aid. In 498 BCE, the Athenian army conquered and burned Sardis, the capital of Lydia, running the Persians out of town. The Athenians weren't terribly interested in this part of the world, though, and headed home. By 495 BCE, the Persians had regained control of the area, and they were angry. King Croesus. Legendary Greeks Jason and the Argonauts. Jason, who was the true son of King Aeson, was brought up by the centaur Chiron, far from court. During this time, King Aeson's half-brother Pelias took over the throne. When he became a grown man, Jason went to court to claim his right to the throne. On his way, Jason met an old woman near a flooded river. She begged him to carry her across the water. Jason did, and lost a sandal in the process. The old woman was the goddess Hera in disguise, and Jason's good deed earned Hera's respect and devoted help. Jason couldn't have known that Pelias had been warned about a threat to his throne that would come wearing only one sandal. Pelias was wary and agreed to name Jason to the throne if he retrieved the golden fleece belonging to the cruel king of Colchis, named Aeetes. With the help of Athena, Jason built a ship called the Argo. He assembled his crew, the Argonauts, and headed off in search of the golden fleece. Reaching Colchis, Jason met Medea, a witch and the daughter of Aeetes. Medea fell in love with Jason and helped him to steal the golden fleece. Jason returned home with Medea, who killed Pelias. But Jason did not claim the throne as he had intended. Instead, he lived with Medea for 10 years in Corinth before rejecting her and marrying King Creon's daughter, Glaucus. Jason lived to an old age and died when he was crushed under the prow of the Argo. The Persians wished to punish Athens for the destruction of Sardis. In 490 BCE, the Athenian and Persian armies met in the Battle of Marathon, perhaps one of the most important battles in Greek history. Marathon was a town northeast of Athens. King Darius sent 25,000 men to land at the Bay of Marathon, and from there the soldiers were to march overland to Athens. Nearly caught by surprise, the Athenians hurried to prepare. A Greek general named Miltiades knew something about Persian battle tactics and formulated a plan. He felt it best to initiate an attack rather than wait for the Persians to act. He placed a long line of men across a narrow valley, with the weakest formation at the front. The front formation was flanked on each side by 2 wings of capable soldiers, but they were hidden from view. Mount Olympus, Marathon, Corinth, Athens, Olympia, Sparta, Aegean Sea, Lydia, Sardis, Miletus. The Persians eagerly attacked the weak front and were immediately surrounded by the hidden Greek soldiers. In vicious hand-to-hand combat, the Persians lost 6,400 men. The Athenians lost only 192. These Athenian soldiers were buried in a common grave on the battlefield. The burial mound is still visible to those that visit modern Greece. Despite the defeat of the Persian army at the Battle of Marathon, one Greek politician, Themistocles, convinced the Athenians that Persia wasn't done with them. Under the guidance of Themistocles, Athens amassed a fleet of over 300 ships by 481 BCE. In the same year, Persia's new king, Xerxes, assembled 150,000 men and a navy of 800 ships, determined to defeat the Greeks once and for all. Themistocles knew that the battle could only be won at sea. The Greeks filled their boats with men skilled in hand-to-hand combat, then lured the Persian ships into the narrow strait between Salamis and Attica. When the Persians sailed into the strait, they were trapped. Themistocles. Megara, Athens, Piraeus, Salamis. Strait of Salamis. Legendary Greeks. Theseus. The sea king, Poseidon, gave a snow-white bull, the Cretan bull, to King Minos of Knossos on Crete. When Minos refused Poseidon's instructions to sacrifice the bull, Poseidon made Pasiphae, King Minos' wife, fall in love with the bull. She gave birth to the beast we call Minotaur, with the body of a man topped by the head of a bull. Minos ordered that a labyrinth or maze be built to contain the Minotaur. While the Minotaur was trapped in the maze, Poseidon released the Cretan bull, allowing it to terrorize the city of Marathon. A man named Theseus killed the bull, saving Marathon from much damage. Stuck with the Minotaur, King Minos demanded a tribute of youth from the city of Athens to be fed to the Minotaur each year. Theseus was determined to stop the sacrifice and went to Crete to slay the Minotaur. With the help of Ariadne, King Mnesos' daughter, he succeeded in slaying the beast and escaping from the labyrinth. With his bravery, Theseus became one of Athens' most famous heroes. At the Battle of Marathon, many soldiers claimed that they saw the famed Theseus running ahead of them, leading them to battle against the Persians. There was not enough room for the ships to maneuver and flee. The Greek navy succeeded in sinking about 300 Persian ships before the rest of the Persians managed to escape. Following this disgraceful loss, Xerxes returned to Persia, leaving a small army of soldiers in Greece to try, yet again, to conquer Athens. They were unsuccessful. Even though fighting continued between the Greeks and the Persians until 449 BCE, the Greek victory in the Battle of Salamis is important because it allowed the Greeks to avoid becoming part of the rapidly expanding Persian Empire. Greek culture might not have thrived if they'd lost their independence to Persia. Xerxes. Marathon runner. As the story goes, when General Miltiades led the Greeks to victory over the Persians in the Battle of Marathon, he ordered a runner to carry news of the triumph back to Athens. This runner, Phidippides, ran approximately 25 miles from the city of Marathon to Athens, shouting, "Rejoice, we conquer!" to all he passed. After having run that far without water or rest, he dropped dead. The modern marathon is based on this legend.